Why did your husband choose recovery and my husband did not? This doesn't have to do with me. This doesn't have to do with the woman. Here is Jay and Lori Pyatt from the Couple Cure with this week's question. Hello, everyone. This goes out to MB. She's a regular client of mine. We just got off our call, and I wanted to get out here really quickly and try to remember what I said because I was going so fast there at the end that I didn't have time to write it all down because she needed to get off the phone. But I wanted to jump out here and record it really quick because her question, I know I struggled with, and I think some women might, and it was so vulnerably put that I wanted to hurry up and get out here and cover it before I forgot. On today's call, her question was, what is it about me that my husband didn't choose recovery? Why did your husband choose recovery and my husband did not? What does Lori have that I don't? And we're going to cover that in depth because I don't have something. This doesn't have to do with me. This doesn't have to do with the woman. Okay. But she also asked, what do guys really want? And I think that answer is key to why some guys put in the work and some guys don't. There are probably a ton of reasons that answer her questions, but I'm going to cover just the ones that came up to me. Before we begin, I want to give a trigger warning. The last section of this video is going to cover things like the look piece. Is it about how I look compared to if that would trigger you? If you're just not at a good place right now, then please consider skipping over the very last part. I'll also give you a heads up as to when that part's about to start. And I also want to say, here's where she was coming from. She said, I feel like it's one of the hardest issues for me to process right now. I don't feel it's a comparison deal. I feel like it's a genuine female emotion to think if he doesn't want the relationship, then what does he really want? Which we'll get to that question in a bit. And why does other men choose to stay and do the hard work for his wife when mine is just willing to throw me away? Which I thought was it was such a raw way of putting it that I wanted to include that as well. She said it's not jealousy. It's much rawer and deeper than that surface level jealousy thing. She says it's a true and deep yearning to know why. Right. The first thing I answered the what's wrong with me, and I said absolutely nothing. It never has anything to do with us. And then I told her, as far as what I've seen in my own work, it has to do with the husband, maybe his wiring, maybe some old abuse, maybe his desire for relationship, period, versus relationship with you. I told her if it were up to us and a group of counselors were to look at her reaction to her husband's hidden life and my reaction, and then were to learn one of their husbands stayed and did the work and one of them, they would probably pick her. Because I don't know that she ever really got angry beyond maybe a level 3 or 4. She always tried to honor him in her responses. She was frustrated and sad, but that was it. She always led with her pain. She talked about her pain. She didn't go to anger. When I talked about my pain, that didn't go anywhere, and it was frustrating. So that ramped up into anger, and that's where we landed for a long time. I did the anger thing. If Jay wanted to fight, if I brought him my pain and said, I want to talk about this, and he escalated, I was right there with him. If he wanted to fight after that, then I was fine with that too. So it doesn't necessarily have to do with how we respond. I didn't say this on the call, but I've never seen this in my work, like a woman who's just being a true monster. She's just driving him to port, and I put that in air quotes because that's not really what happens. Even if a woman was being a monster, he still has to learn coping mechanisms. He can still go for help. He can still learn to communicate. He can still get space if he needs to without acting out in his addiction. So there's still a responsibility, like with us betrayed partners, even though we're the wounded ones, we still have a responsibility to learn coping techniques and to get help if we need it in order to help our recovery, in order to help keep us safe. We need to get space without that being a license to be involved in addictive substances or do things that are going to harm us and the family. So this leads me to the next topic, and that is coping mechanisms. My husband learned them. He created those habits, and those became his character. He saw it as, I'm worth becoming a person who does that versus a person who can't look himself in the eye because he's acting out, you know? So that's part of it as well. What do they feel like they are worth? And that applies for communication and going for help as well. My husband was like, I want to know that I'm the kind of guy that learned communication skills, that went for help when he needed to. The next part is vulnerability. For my client's husband, real relationship might feel too vulnerable, whereas it didn't to my husband. My husband knew, because of his past, how good relationships, real relationships, can feel. He learned that in his family. He learned that with some of his friends growing up, and he wanted that. So my husband knew the relationship will be worth the vulnerability, the risk that it takes. Like, what if I do this and it doesn't lead to what I want? What if I expose my heart? What if I own up to what I did and she uses it against me? Number one, I think he saw that I wasn't going to do that. Not that my client doesn't see that. Some guys get kind of cloudy in their head when it comes to the true character of their wives. I know most, if not all, of my clients would never do that. They would rather move on than going there or stooping to that level of exploitation, you know? So that's a part of vulnerability as well. My husband over time was able to lock that away in his head, saying, you know, my wife isn't like that. She's not going to use that against me. So that's part of the vulnerability piece as well. And not to say that her husband didn't get vulnerable. She shared something that he shared with her, and I'm like, wow, that took a lot of guts for him to say that. And she said he's had very many beautiful moments of that. So it's not like knocking him. I truly believe that there might have been some things in his past that it just feels too risky to stay that exposed. Going back to my husband knowing that relationships, real relationships, can feel good. My client's husband might find that something else feels better. He might be getting involved in a certain aspect of his job where he's getting more accolades and more recognition, and he might go like, I can do that, and this is enough for me. She also said something on the call that I think ties to it. We were talking about doing the work and putting in the work, and she said, I just don't understand why they don't. It seems easy to me. And I said, to me and you, it does. You know, we are used to our girlfriends coming to us and say, hey, that really hurt. Oh my gosh, I'll stop, you know? And even if they come harshly and we're kind of defensive, we still care enough to go, I'm going to change that up. We care enough about the relationship to stop. And then she said something key, and that is, you're right. If my child came to me and said, that really hurts, I would know that I would feel a void unless I made it right. So I'm going to do everything I can to make it right and repair with this child so I don't feel that void. And I said, you're on to something there. That is huge. It could be for your husband that the void was always there. Like if he got hurt way back in his childhood and he hasn't talked a whole lot about it, so we don't know exactly what went on. But if there was some really big injuries, he might have closed off his heart early on in life and just thought, you know, this is just what happens. And he might not have ever had that connection to know that there would be a void if he doesn't make it right or doesn't repair it. You know, he might even have gotten married and still had a shield up around his heart to never have that deep connection to know, like, I don't want to lose this. You know, it could be, well, that's just life. People don't really connect, you know? And so if I don't do the work, it's just going to be more of the same where I'm not really connected to somebody. For my husband, because he had known what real relationships and true connection can feel like, knew that there would be a void. You know, he had something he wanted to keep from happening. That doesn't have anything to do with me. He does that with a lot of his relationships. He doesn't want to lose any relationships. He's always been one to grieve when relationships are over, like when running buddies have to move and that sort of thing. Whereas some people are like, well, it's just the course of life. It's not something we can really fight at all. Then we addressed her question, what do men really want? I said, easy. The human brain is geared toward easy. And I said, for me and you, we think repairing the relationship is going to be easier than this turmoil. Whereas a lot of guys, especially early on, think defensiveness is going to be easier, or, going off and looking at my career is easier. That's actually the first thing my husband did. He said, okay, I will make a counseling appointment. But the first counseling appointment he had on his own, he was talking about his job. And I'm like, we just had the biggest D-Day we've ever had. I'm telling you, something has to be different. And you're focusing on your job? Because in my husband's mind, the true problem was work was hard. So he wanted to alleviate that. But again, that kind of speaks to he wanted easy. I told my client they want easy, and real humans are not easy. We are real life. We're not fantasies. We have needs, we have wants, we have emotions, we have hurts. We have a need to repair things. We have real, legitimate upsets. And we have shared values that when the guy goes against it, we're going to want to talk about that. Many people are geared toward easy. Porn addicts in particular are used to not having to do anything to see a pretty smile and to see a face that looks like they like you. They don't have to do much, and that can get them used to not being able to do the hard work at all. Well, like, you're asking for something from me. I haven't been hanging around women on the internet who ask anything of me. I don't have to do anything and get them to smile. After I said that, then she said, the steps are not hard. And I said, exactly, for me and you. His response might be something fear-driven or trauma-driven, we don't know. It doesn't seem so easy to him. Whereas I could say, and I do say to my clients, okay, the first step is to use your calming techniques and then get to that place of empathy and validation. Not just hear what she says and be able to parrot that back, which is important because he can misinterpret it, but to really feel her emotions in it. Ooh, I remember feeling that way. And yes, that feels horrible. And oh my gosh, I did that to you. It can really shift him from defensiveness, these steps that we give him. When we mark it out like that, it's not hard at all. So that's the unfortunate thing. A lot of men don't understand it is easy. You do this, 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 and this. Swallowing your pride might be hard. It's going to feel like searing pain. It's so hard to admit that I did that or to own up to it. And try it. Here's some words to say to try it on. Was that so hard? No. Okay, just say that. And once you get those words out, then it's a little bit easier to go like, wow, my world didn't fall apart. Wow, they're not kicking me out of the house that I owned. Yes, I did those things. If guys want easy, it can really be maybe not super easy. It's hard doing something new, but we can map it out for you. And hopefully, if you're working with somebody, they can do the same thing as well. And this speaks to men's character as well. Do I want to be known as a guy who can handle the hard things, who can do the hard work, who can repair what I've broken? I'm not trying to puff my husband up like he's perfect. He's not perfect. I'm not perfect. Neither one of us are. And it still speaks to the kind of character he wanted. Okay, so at this point, we're going to go into the trigger warning part. So if you're not at a good place, feel free to jump off now, and we'll see you next time. And for the rest of you who are staying, the last part can be a question just because it's almost like the only power women are allowed to have in modern society is the way we look. So I wanted to address that, and I addressed it with her. I said, this is not about how I look, at least how I used to, this is not about how we look. And here's how we know the women they find in porn, it's never just one. My husband has said out here on these videos a couple times before, I thought maybe if I would just find the right woman, then everything would fall into place and I wouldn't use porn anymore. It wasn't like he finally found one. It was just like, oh, you are the end all be all. No, he got sick of what she was doing or how she looked. I know one of them, he said she had too much work done on her body and he didn't like how she looked anymore. It was like, I'm not okay with that. Now I'm going to turn to somebody else. And okay, now you're boring me. And so it really speaks to the part in that side of our husbands that is really not satisfiable. There's a lack of contentment. There's a lack of spiritual grounding there. There's a lack of finding something that truly satisfies. But I think that's all I had. Thank you for joining me. Again, I really felt like she hit the nail on the head and I didn't want to miss it. And I felt like there was enough women out there that I wanted to, make a video and make sure I included the stuff that I gave her. I guess we'll end here. Thank you for joining me and we'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.